Welcome! It's time to start stitching our mermaid. So to start, we're going to start with 3 strands of 600 floss, the darkest pink color, to start. And I've got a knot at the end of my thread. And we're going to start on the outside of her hair, running along this line right here. You'll see that these lighter lines, that's where we're going to be stitching, but we're going to be doing them in different colors. I made them all the same lighter color so they'd stand out from her hair so that we could know what we're doing. So we're going to start right here on the top of her head. So bring the thread all the way up, and now we're going to go down along the line into her hair. Next, we come up the same stitch length away on her hair. And now we're going to make a back stitch. So we're going to go back towards this first part, this first stitch, and our needle goes right there at the end of our first stitch. And then we repeat. We go a stitch length down the line of her hair. There we go. Pull our thread up and then go down in. Now you can make your stitches fairly large here. Her hair is wavy, but the curves aren't super small. So we're just going to keep stitching this line until we get to the flower. And then when we get to her flower in her hair, we're going to skip over to down below to stitch the next part. Now some things to think about. We want to keep our needle on our thread when we're stitching. So what I like to do is I pull the needle and then I grab the rest of the thread with the rest of my fingers to then pull it so that my needle stays on my thread. Another thing you can do is you can grab closer to the eye of the needle. See, this is going to be my last stitch right here, right to that tip of the flower. So the other thing you can do is you can hold on right here, and that will make it so your needle doesn't get pulled off the end of your floss. Now, to try and find where to stitch, if you're stitching from the front of your fabric, okay, got a little tangle, there we go. You can see right here, I'm holding my needle like a pencil and I'm just pushing down and pulling. If I do that same thing from behind, you can see right here, there's my needle. So I can drag my needle to where I want it to be and then pull it up to figure out where to stitch next. You could also flip your hoop over and look at it from the back side. That's how my daughter likes to do it. If you do that, you might find that you need to draw some extra lines on the back to see where to stitch. If you draw extra lines on the back, I would use a pencil and just be very careful about where you draw, because a pencil does not erase off of fabric. It's going to be stuck there. But since it's the back, it won't really matter if you just draw right where you need to stitch. So I'm going to keep stitching to the end of this line, and then we'll talk about where we're going to do 600 next. All right, let's check in real quick. You can see here that the tail of my thread is getting really close to where I'm stitching. And if I don't do anything, I'm going to start stitching the tail of my thread and my working thread at the same time, which we don't want to happen. We want to have just our working thread go through the fabric. So what we're going to do is you're just going to take your needle and only hold the needle, and you're going to pull it so that the needle slides down the thread. And now you can see, oh, I pulled a little too far, that instead of having my working end all the way over here, it's now over here so that I've got more thread to stitch with. So you need to remember to slide your needle down your thread as you're stitching so that you don't end up with two strands of floss or layers of floss through your stitches instead of just the one we were going for. All right. Once we get to the point of her hair here, you may notice that I'm taking a little bit smaller stitches right here through this more curvy part of her hair. Once we get to the tip though, we have a choice. There are two other 600 dark pink lines that connect from here, and we have to choose which one to stitch. Now I've got a pretty big chunk of floss on my needle still, so I think I'm going to pick the longer of the two. So from here, 600 takes this line under her hand, under her hand, oh, there we go, this one, by the tail to her bum. And that one's pretty short, and I've got a lot of floss left. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this line that goes down here on the bottom of this darker pink section and follow that line up towards her head and see how far I can get on this section of floss. So that means I'm going to go right here on this light pink line. And then I'm following the bottom. I want to go under the darker color of pink in her hair. Now, if you get a little confused and start stitching on the wrong line, don't worry. The wonderful part of your mermaid's hair is that it's all pink and flowy, so it doesn't really matter where you stitch. You can stitch just about anywhere you want, and it's gonna look wonderful. And I tried to make it that way so that you could have flowy mermaid hair and not have to worry too much about which line you're stitching on. So you can see I'm staying under the dark pink for this darker line. All right, I've made it to her head. The rest of these lines right here are other lighter colors of pink. And I have a little bit of floss left on my needle. So I'm gonna jump up to the top side of this flower here and stitch along her forehead, and then probably stitch this little section here and see how much floss I have from there. See how much farther I need to go. Now, if you've run out of floss by now, don't worry. Every stitcher is a little bit different in how quickly we go through our floss. So if you need to stop and tie off and change your floss before I do, that is 100% okay. We'll talk about how to tie off our floss here in just a minute when I do run out of floss. I've made it to about as far as I want to stitch. You can see I have just a little bit left on my needle. And I like to anchor off on the back instead of tying a knot. Now usually I would just flip my hoop over and show you, but my setup today is a little bit tricky. So I'm gonna pull this other embroidery in and show you how I anchor, except on this. So let's pretend this is the back. It is the back of a mermaid. So what I'll do is I'll take my thread to the back, and then there'll be a line of stitching right where I just stitched, and I will go under it one time, and then I'll go along the line a little bit and go under the line of stitching again, and then I'll come back to where I started, and I'll go under the line of stitching here, and then I'll pull all of that tight and cut, and then it'll stay right there and I don't have to tie any knots. So I'm going to anchor off on the back of my hoop and change to a new length of 600 for thread, and we'll be ready to stitch again. All right, I finished. I added more thread on my needle and I stitched the rest of the dark pink lines. So these are all the ones that are dark pink. You can see right here that the pink line, dark pink line, stops with this section of dark pink hair. It doesn't go quite all the way to her hip, and then it's not on the bottom right here. It starts one line up and goes past her tail and then meets at the tip over here. Now, I have switched to 603, the lightest pink, and I have 3 strands again and a knot at the end of my needle, and I'm going to start up here on the top of her hair, and I'm going to stitch some light pink, and we'll check in again in a little bit. All right, I just finished with our lightest color of pink. You can see the light pink line goes to the flower, and from the flower all the way into the tip here. So some of those stitches are going to sit right next to this darker pink line. Then it takes the bottom line here up to her arm, under her arm a little bit, and then over to her belly. I want to make sure that her arm is on top, right? Her hair is going behind her arm. So we don't want any pink stitches over the arm. Then there's a line that goes here, under her arm, up there, and then from the top all the way down under her arm again. And then this one finishes the bottom of the hair right here. Now, I've got 602, the middle color of pink on my needle. Again, 3 stitches, knot at the end, and I'm going to finish stitching in the rest of these light pink lines. Everything that's left is like medium pink. All right, now that we've finished the pink, we're gonna do her skin color. So we're gonna do under her chin, her neck, arms, sides, and I have 739 on my needle. Again, we're using 3 strands of floss and a knot to start. So we're gonna do some more back stitch. So I'm gonna start right at here at the flower. I'm gonna go under her chin and then work my way around the rest of her arms and body. Now down here on her hand, we probably want to take a little bit smaller stitches just so that her hand has a nice gentle curve to it instead of a choppy line. So I'm just going to make my stitch length a little bit shorter here. Now here at the tip of the finger, I'm not going to make a stitch that goes this way. I'm just going to make this stitch. I'm going to have it sit next to my other stitch. So we're going to have it sit right here. So instead of having it go down into the previous stitch, we're going to have it sit next to it, and then the thread finishes that finger, but then it doesn't look quite as pointy and looks more like a fingertip, which is what we're going for. And I'll just keep stitching around in here and using smaller stitches to get around these more curvy bits. All right, and that is all of the neutral body color that we're gonna stitch. Next, we're gonna get some yellow on our thread and do the flower. All right, it's time to stitch our flower. I have 3 strands of 7 to 8 on my needle, and we're only gonna stitch half of these little petals. There are 12 petals, and we're gonna stitch 6. You can see this one that's lined up right with the eye. This one's a little more orange, and this one's a little more yellow. We're gonna stitch the little more yellow ones. So if you line up with the eye and then go up 1 petal, that's the first petal we're gonna use. So we're gonna go up at the tip of the flower. And we're gonna do what I like to call a straight puff stitch, which may or may not be a real thing, but I like how it looks. Oh, it's hard to see this spot through my camera. There we go. All right, so you're gonna pull your thread up. Then we're gonna go down in the middle here. Okay, that's number 1. Now we're gonna do number 2. We're gonna go up right at the tip of the flower, right at the same spot if you can get it, and down into the middle. That's number 2. And then we're going to do it a 3rd time. Come up at the top and down in the middle. Now we're going to do that 1, 2, 3 on each of the yellow petals. So this one, here, 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 and here. So every other petal as we go around. So again, up on the outside, down in the middle. Up on the outside, down in the middle. And I'm not pulling these super tight. You're gonna be gentle with these. As you come down into the middle, you just gently pull your thread. Oh, I'm caught on the top. There we go. Gently pull your thread until it sits right on top of the previous stitches. And now we repeat. All right, there's our finished flower. I'm gonna anchor off and we're gonna go to purple. Okay, for our purple, we have 3 strands of 553. That's the lighter purple. And we're gonna learn a new stitch. We're gonna do chain stitch up the inside of these light purple parts, and then we're gonna come back with the dark purple and fill in the other lines. Now, you have enough floss that you can test this out, and if it's not working for you, you can just cut it out and we'll talk about what option 2 is. So let's learn chain stitch. We're gonna come up at the base right here, and then you're gonna hold the floss out of the way and go down in almost exactly the same spot. And you're gonna stop with a loop on top of your fabric. Then you're gonna come up 1 stitch length away, right in the middle, and then you pull your needle up. And I want you to pull up towards the top of her head. If I pull down towards me this way, then stitch won't work. You got to pull up towards the top of her head because that's the way we're stitching. And you just gently pull until the chain stitch is nice and snug. Now we're going to go back down right here where our thread is inside that loop. And again, we stop and leave a loop on top of the fabric. Then we're going to go up in the middle and pull up the direction we're stitching. And then we're going to do this one more time. Down where the previous stitch is, leave the loop. Now this one's just a little bit different because we're going to finish the stitch right here so that we can go to the bottom again and start the next one. So this one I've pulled up and it's nice and snug, and now I'm just going to go down on the outside of my loop and pull my thread down, and that anchors the last one in place. And now we repeat 3 more chain stitches right here. Oh, if I don't pull my needle out. Pull the needle up, back down at the same spot, leave a loop, up through the loop, pull till snug, back into the loop right where we were, leave a loop. So if you've tested this out and you're having lots of problems, you can just unpick and try again, or you could just make 2 rows of backstitch close together in this space instead. I'm caught on something. Oh no, I have not. Hold that thought. Okay, fix the knot, pull this nice and snug, and then again we're going to anchor. Just go down outside the top of that loop. And then we repeat. So if you wanted to do 2 rows of backstitch instead of a chain stitch, you would come up here and then you would just make a row of backstitch. You know, 1 row here, 1 row back down, and then another 2 rows in the next light purple spot instead of making chain stitch. I'm going to keep doing chain stitch across, and then we will do our dark purple. All right, I just stitched most of the darker purple, realized I didn't like it, and I have a new purple that we're working with. So we're now stitching with 3837, which is no surprise to you because that's the number color of floss in your kit. So I've stitched this strap and a little bit right here. And now I'm going to continue going up over this row of chain stitch. And it's taking me 2 little stitches to get up and over. And then you go down in between, and we're just doing back stitch. So you take nice normal stitches here, and then it looks like you can't make it all the way to the bottom. So you could stop right here if you wanted, or you can just push your needle up in between and then make that last stitch right here. Now from the bottom, I'm going to go up the other direction. Let's talk about some more choices. If this feels too difficult, first of all, you have enough floss that you can test it out and see how you feel about it. And if it's not working for you, you can always cut out some stitches and try again. Second of all, if for some reason this is just too much to get all of these stitches in here together, one choice would be to not use the lighter color and just do the darker purple stitches and just stitch the accent lines. Here at the bottom of the shell, we're going to do one big stitch across the whole bottom, and then I'm going to come down here because I can still see my print a little bit and do a second big stitch across the bottom to accent the bottom of the shell. And then I'm going to jump over here and stitch the middle. And then I'm going to back stitch down to the bottom and do those two big stitches on this side. So the take-home message here is do what feels best for you. This is your embroidery. I've given you some choices, and I think you are capable and awesome and can stitch it however you want, but I also don't want you to be frustrated. So pick what works best for you and go from there. Now let's get this strap stitched. I'm just going to do it in two big stitches. So one big straight stitch right here, and then straight stitch number 2. We want it to look like she's wearing these straps, not that they somehow disappear into her shoulder. So we're going to go up over our outline stitches right there so that this purple strap looks like it's going up and over, like it's being worn. Now I'm going to continue stitching in between and we will be done with purple. All right, we have made it down to the tail. So I have 3 strands of 943 on my needle. That's the darker green teal color. And we're going to stitch all of the dark lines. So we're going to stitch around these two kind of upper waistbands. And then we're going to stitch around the tail, all of these darker green lines here, up the tail, and then we'll be ready for sequins. So I'm just going to do back stitch here. Nothing that you haven't had lots of practice with already. Now the stitches up here where I've started have to be a little bit smaller because this is a more curvy shape here. Oh, got some of my starting knot. There we go. Got to be a little bit smaller to get around these curves. And then the rest of the stitches for here can be a little bit bigger. All right, it is time to do sequins. So I have got 3 strands of 958, the lighter teal, on my needle. I've just tied a knot in the end, and we're going to attach 1 sequin for every scale of our mermaid's tail. All right, so you can do this one of 2 ways or both ways. Change your mind as you go. So let's do the easy way first. So I'm going to come up in the middle of this scale. I'm going to pull my thread all the way up, and I'm going to take my sequin here. Okay, real quick note on the sequins. So sequins are curved a little bit. So this one, or these sequins are, so it either sits like a little bowl and the edges curve up, or it sits like a little mountain and the edges curve down. I like it when it sits like a bowl best. I like it when the edges curve up. It doesn't matter which way you pick. I would suggest keeping them all the same direction. So I'm going to stick my needle through the hole and slide that sequin all the way down to where it belongs. Then I'm going to go down on the outside of the sequin. Right, and then I pull the thread down, and you can see that one side is caught. So now I'm going to go up on the other side of the sequin and down, almost, there you go, down through the middle. And now that sequin is very stuck on. So you can continue doing them that way. Go up through the middle, and then, well, let's do one more that way. Let's make sure we understand. So over here, we're going to do this one now. So I'm going to go up kind of through the middle, sequin on my needle, pull all the way up. I'm going to go down on one side, and then I'm going to come up on the other side, and again down in the middle. So that is option 1. Option 2, I'm going to come up in the middle here, pull my thread up, got my sequin. We're going to make a French knot. So this is how we're going to do it. First, you need to make a circle with your thread. If you're left-handed, the circle goes from the thread to your right hand, all the way down and around to needle on your right hand. If you're left-handed, it's going to go the other way. Okay, the thread will go to your right hand and all the way around to needle in your left hand. I'm right-handed, so I'm going to work the right-handed way. Now you probably want to set your hoop down on like a pillow or a table so that you can use both hands. So we're going to take our thread and we're going to wrap it around the needle 1, 2, 3 times, because we need a pretty big knot to keep this sequin in place. And then I'm going to slide all the thread right down on top of the sequin and pull this through. And now, yep, we have sequin hooked on. So let's talk through that again. I'm going to work over here to my right, up in the middle, sequin on. Now French knot, remember, circle with the thread. Thread to the left hand, all the way around to the right. Wrap 1, 2, 3 times, and the needle goes back into the fabric through the center of the sequin. And I push it down just a little bit so that, as you can see, it stays there. And then you pull this thread down until it is touching the sequin. Then you just kind of want to hold it out of the way, pull it through, sequin. Now again, I've given you lots of floss so you can practice this. If you want to try the French knots, but they don't work out, that's okay. Just go ahead and snip out the knots, and then you can attach them using this other method. All right, so you just keep going, 1 sequin for every scale. Some of these edge ones, you might not want to put a sequin on. Like this itty bitty one right here, I probably won't put a sequin on that one because there's not enough surface area for this whole big sequin to be. I'm going to keep attaching sequins. All right, one thing you're going to notice is that you probably are going to have to stop and tie off sooner with French knots than you would any other stitch, because you need to have a fair amount of thread to be able to wrap your thread around your needle. So don't be afraid to stop if it feels like you are running out of thread sooner than you would be with another stitch. Okay, friends, here are all of my sequins stitched on. Now, this sequin is a little bit wider than this space, so I cut off a little bit of each of this edge after I stitched it on. And then there were a couple bigger gaps that were bugging me, and they might not bother you at all. And if that's the case, go with that. If they do bug you, I cut a couple sequins in half, and I just stitched them on like these first two up here, so that they would fill in this space a little bit. Now these ones are not going to be the most secure, so if this embroidery is going to be touched and played with, then probably don't do these ones because they might fall off, whereas these big ones are going to hold still a lot better. Either way, I hope you enjoy your mermaid and that she makes you super happy. Thank you for stitching with me, and I hope to see you again. Happy stitching, friends.